In the 21st century. One, because it created judicial review and it created accountability for our Congress, which we did not have prior to this case. At the end of Adams' presidential time, they were doing something that was called the Midnight Judges, where the Federalists were trying to get all these positions filled for judges in order to be making laws and stuff like that. But when Jefferson was inaugurated, his Secretary of State, James Madison, decided not to follow through with the appointment of Marbury. Marbury then turned around and sued Madison, which then opened up for the Supreme Court, which what it ended up doing is, they feared that the Federalists were controlling the Constitution and the rights and stuff like that, and that the judges that Adams had filled with a lot of Federalist supporters. So when Madison at that time obviously was he was an anti-Federalist, so he really didn't want Marbury in as judge. But this opened up for the Supreme Court to have the ability for judicial review in regards to Congress legislation, kind of a little bit of like our dual government. So in other words, it held them accountable for what they did and the laws that they made and the rulings that would happen that involved Congress. What happened was is that, like I said, it was the first case where the Supreme Court was able to rule something against Congress. And what happened is that they had ruled a year later that definitely Madison and Jefferson had acted unconstitutionally. They had Jefferson had found a bunch of letters that were there that were for Mr. Marbury. He had forbid for them to be delivered. So what they did is, in other words, the court felt that Madison and Jefferson pretty much had blocked the commissions because this man had been appointed to be in the court by the commissions, So definitely it held Congress accountable. That's what this decision signified. Congress was accountable to someone other than the people. They were accountable to the Supreme Court, to judicial review. They couldn't just hand out, decisions without having any consequences. That's what the significance of this was. The little cartoon strip that I decided to add it. This is how our government functioned beforehand. We're pretty much, the states pretty much ran the government. It wasn't the government that ran the government. We had a very weak government. So the states ran it. And by changing this meant that not only would Congress be held accountable, but also the office of the presidency, the executive office, which I think, in turn gave us a stronger Supreme Court and gave us a stronger executive process and a stronger judicial process and a stronger Congress and legislative process, because it meant that not only would Congress be held accountable for the judiciary, but judiciary would also be held, accountable to Congress. So what I understood is that it made more accountability. This decision would go to impact, our lives in the future, as far as Congress being able to was as far as the Supreme Court being able to rule over Congress decisions. I mean, look at when they stepped in at Brown versus, the paper that we're going to write on the Board of Education. It's impacted a lot of things in our future, because just because a law is put in place doesn't mean that it's good for the people. And that's when you can appeal to the Supreme Court so that they can hear what the people have to say, and they end up being the law of the land. So to conclude, for me, one of the things that I guess I would, I'm not sure that there's something that I think that I would want to change, because definitely our Supreme Court follows the Constitution. I guess what I would want is I would like to see the Constitution, parts of the Constitution, amended to reflect the 21st century, because I really don't believe that back then that they could have even imagined where we might be now. That would be about the only thing that I would like to see, is some sort of amendment to the Bill of Rights to reflect the 21st century, or to add to that, but that's about the only thing that I would say. So in conclusion, it brought about judicial review. It brought about checks and balances, which was good for the country. Because if you don't do that, then you end up getting tyranny and being run by a dictatorship. So this was a very good decision. Judge Rehnquist said, and let me follow, that he hailed it as the most significant single contribution to the United States, and that has made the art of government. He said nations around the world look at Marbury as they work to create institutions that will protect the rule of law. As the United States thinks anew about its commitment to these rules, it would serve us well to draw the wisdom of this landmark decision. So basically, what it does, what he says, is it protects the rule of law.